Our presentation is about authentic assessments, and we are the purple group. An authentic assessment is a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. There are other names for authentic assessments. One might be performance assessment or performance-based assessment. It has that name because students are asked to perform a meaningful task. It is one of the other most common terms for this type of assessment. Another name is alternative assessment. It has that name because an authentic assessment is an alternative to traditional assessments. And the last one is direct assessment, and it has that name because authentic assessments provide more direct evidence of meaningful application of knowledge and skills. If a student does well in a multiple choice test, we might infer indirectly that the student could apply that knowledge in real world contexts, but we would be more comfortable making that inference from a direct demonstration of that application. So authentic assessments are developed from classroom instruction, group work, or related classroom activities. So you want to make sure that it's related to what you are doing in your classroom. And they are valid and reliable because they still assess a student's performance. Authentic assessments can do the following. They can facilitate the student's participation. They can provide relevant information to teachers. They can emphasize real-world problems, and you can still measure individual growth. There are many different types of authentic assessment. One is performance-based assessments. It means you're actually doing a task. Another would be a portfolio, so that includes samples of student work. It can be paper, it can be online, and the evidence that you have needs to meet a certain criteria. Another one is a self-assessment or a peer assessment, which means that the student needs to use a rubric. There's other types of authentic assessments. The picture in the top right shows play-based assessment. You can do interview-based assessment. The bottom left picture shows cooperative group assessment. And then the bottom right picture shows dialogue journals, which I find very interesting, and then also scaffolded essays. All of these were listed in our reading that we just had. And then this document, I know that it's a lot to read, but we'll have the link for you at the end. But it shows a lot of other different authentic assessments that can be used, such as like an oral interview. It can be a story or a retelling of something using different writing samples, different projects, experiments would work great for science classrooms, teacher observations, and constructed response items. So you might be thinking, why would we use authentic assessments? Well, there's multiple reasons, but some that we found was that authentic assessments typically included higher level thinking skills. So if you look at the chart or the triangle at the bottom right, you see that at the very top is evaluation, and then you have synthesis and analysis, and you're using more of those skills when you do an authentic assessment instead of just the typical responding to general questions. And it can be a lot more engaging for students. They are doing a lot more hands-on learning, and students are active participants in the assessment process because they can do self-assessments and peer assessments, and it's just active on everybody's part, so everybody is fully engaged in the learning. So there's a lot of pros to authentic assessment. It can provide more understanding into what students are successfully learning and what they have not fully learned. This type of assessment is very appealing to students and can motivate them. And this assessment gives the instructor usable information that we can use to teach the concept again or move on knowing that the students understood what was taught to them. So to understand what authentic assessment is, it's important for students to self-assess if you do an authentic assessment, It helps them to see their growth and understanding of success. And teachers and students need to understand why we are doing what we are doing, why we are doing this authentic assessment. And it's also important to have collaboration so students, teachers, and parents can all work together to help assess. And it's important to have that home connection when you are doing these assessments. There are many benefits of authentic assessment. It can increase academic achievement. It can increase application and retention of information, and it can build communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. So authentic assessments are beneficial for CLD students as well as any other student in your classroom. So if you do a traditional assessment, they are heavily language dependent. These can be like essays, multiple choice, and fill in the blank. So if a student is struggling with sequential vocabulary, they may not be able to write an essay on the water cycle. However, if they're given the opportunity to do a hands-on type of assessment through experimentation or pictures, the same student may be able to demonstrate knowledge of that content, confirming for the teacher their knowledge of science, not their limitations in English. While some authentic forms of assessment can be time-consuming, they are worth the effort when working with students who often have high anxiety levels under traditional testing situations and who may simply need additional time to complete a test or a task. So it's important to remember that the traditional assessments, they're trying to measure, they end up measuring the student's language skills rather than what the student has learned. And so CLD students can really struggle to show mastery of what they've learned if they don't have a certain level of English proficiency. So this chart just shows a difference between authentic assessments and traditional assessments, and it kind of shows what we've already talked about. Traditional means you select a response. It's very recall and recognition. You're not really thinking too deeply, and the teacher is more involved. But with an authentic assessment, the student is performing a task. It has a real-life connection, and the students structure it and help form it. So to make an authentic assessment, you have to identify the standards that you want to cover, select the authentic task, identify the criteria for the task and what you want them to do, and then create the rubric on how to assess those students. And these are our references. Thank you for listening.